The governor of the state of Hawaii recently issued an emergency proclamation due to the lack of affordable housing in Hawaii. I'm going to give you my thoughts on that coming up next. Hey, what's going on, friends? The governor recently issued an emergency proclamation that basically declares a state of emergency for our housing situation here in Hawaii. And so I'm going to share some thoughts on this. I've been asked kind of what do you think about this? Is it going to help? And so I'll address that and give you some things that I think need to be done to better address the problem, or more realistically address the problem. So if you haven't been watching it on the news, the emergency proclamation basically does three things. It creates a director to oversee this proclamation and the effort to create more affordable housing. It creates a working group to talk about it and come up with more ideas. And then most substantively, it suspends a bunch of laws, environmental laws, zoning laws, different things that slow down the process of building homes, because that is the essential problem. Is we do not build enough homes in order to keep up with the amount of additional demand and population that continues to grow, and not only for the people that already live here, but the people that obviously want to come and live in Hawaii because it is such a great place to live. And so the idea is that we want to create more houses, and this emergency proclamation is supposed to help do that. The ironic thing about this is, my first big take on this is not an emergency, right? An emergency is when a fire surprisingly starts in your home due to a bad electrical connection or something like that, right? This is a crisis that is really self-inflicted. This is a situation where we've been pouring gasoline and playing with matches inside of our house for years and years and years, and now there's a fire. That's two different things, right? We can have a emergency that we didn't see coming that is like a hurricane, right? That's what these emergency laws are designed for, is that there's a hurricane coming and it hits and we have to suspend all these laws in order to address the damage that the hurricane made. This housing crisis is something that has been building up for years and years and years, and our governor has been in the legislature for like 20 years, in the House and the Senate, and served as lieutenant governor. This is something that could have been addressed before. This is not an emergency, so this is probably not the appropriate way to handle this. It's not the appropriate way to use emergency powers to handle something like this that is a legislative policy issue that has been building up for years and years and years. We all saw it come in. This is no surprise. It's not an emergency. It's a self-inflicted crisis. And so when you also look at the fact that now we've issued this emergency proclamation, the timing is very odd. It literally happened a month after the close of our legislative session. So in Hawaii, our legislature meets from January to May every year. They have their session, they change laws, they pass laws, the governor has to sign or veto them, just like any other democracy around the country. And so right after the legislative session ends, where you can change laws, we issue this emergency proclamation which suspends a bunch of laws. The right way to go about doing this would have been to put a legislative package together, have the legislature examine those ideas, debate those ideas, get input from the community, and pass, repeal, change the laws that are being restrictive to building more housing. But that is not what happened. There was very little that came out of the legislature that addressed this issue, and instead we do an emergency proclamation to suspend the laws afterwards. So it's very much not the way that our system is designed, or a representative democracy is supposed to work. But that's hard, right? Making real change through a legislature is hard, and that's why it never gets done, is because nobody's doing that hard work to address the real issues at hand and actually solve this problem. And so there's really a couple of issues that need to be addressed, which are the ones that we keep pushing back and we never actually address. And the first one is, it costs way too much to develop land in Hawaii nowadays. There are so many restrictions, environmental restrictions, traffic studies that you gotta do, archaeological studies that you gotta do. You have to then build parks and build sidewalks and do all kinds of additional stuff in order to take a piece of land and subdivide it and then build homes on it, that people just don't do it anymore. It's too costly to actually do it. And in most cases, the only time you see people build new homes are multi-million dollar homes, because it's so costly, the investment is so costly to take a raw piece of land and make it into a lot that you can build a home on, that the only way you can make a profit is to build a luxury home on it, which obviously is not for normal people. So that's the first problem, is that's got to be addressed, and the state and the counties can do things to help subsidize that, maybe remove some of the archaic, unnecessary restrictions, maybe do some of the studies on large tracts of land to make sure that all of that is taken care of. There are no archaeological issues, there will be no traffic issues, or maybe address traffic issues prior to developing. There are things the county and the state can do to be more proactive to reduce some of that burden and cost to developers who want to build more housing, because believe me, they're out there. I talk to them all the time. They're always looking for pieces of land that are zoned properly, that have the water. There's so many things that they have to look at. There's so much risk before they buy a piece of property that a lot of times it doesn't make sense for them to do it. So there's all those practical issues. Then the next one is, and this might be the bigger one that's very frustrating for folks that live here, is that the state and the counties do not enforce the laws that, or approvals that they give to people. And so what I mean by this is that you can take all this time, do all the studies in the world, do all of the proper permitting, get all the proper approvals from all of the different government agencies, and then you start to break ground on a project, and then your neighbor complains, and your neighbor complains to the city council person or the county council person, complains to their state rep, and then people will not get involved and say, you know what, we've gone through the process, we give these people the approvals, they get to move forward and build a development that they had planned to build, that they went through all the proper channels to get approvals for. And so the politicians kowtow and fold to these protesters and other community advocates that are getting in the way of people trying to do the right thing and build housing. And so what does that do? That disincentivizes other people from getting engaged, getting involved, wanting to do the same thing. Because why am I going to come out there and spend $10 million to do all of these studies, all of these approvals, get all of these permits, do all of the approvals that I got to get, to have a few noisy people, not in my backyard people, come out and object to my development, and then put a hold on it for years upon years, or maybe even put an end to it, and I've lost all that money. So we've created a situation where nobody wants to do this because it's too risky, it's too costly, and then even if you go through that process, the government will not enforce the approvals that they gave you, and they'd rather kowtow to some noisy neighbor that tries to shut you down. So these are all things that we really should be addressing, that are not addressed in this emergency proclamation. And most importantly, probably, is people, if you care about this and you're passionate about the issue, you really need to examine the people that you're electing, because that's, at the end of the day, who makes all of these laws. And a lot of times the same people get elected over and over and over again, or different people with the same positions, and then we just stay frustrated as a community. So really dig into it and understand what the positions of the people that you are electing are, because those are the only ones that can actually end up affecting any change and changing the laws that are restricting our ability to build more housing here in Hawaii. So if you have any questions or other opinions on this, I'd love to hear them in the comments below, or you can email me at dylan@5bigisland.com, and I'll see you guys next week. Aloha.